Hello, parents and others who are following my channel and just in search of some wisdom and some truth, if you will, and certainly not mine, but I just I suppose happen to be a happy messenger um, and someone who likes to spend time contemplating, what's going on in the world and with the wisdom teachings that we have been given over the many thousands of years. Um, I wanted to quickly touch upon a topic because it's a regular issue that I consulted about, primarily by parents, and it certainly was something that has come up in this last week, and one that we don't really hear too much about. And it's a huge topic, and so I'm not going to be able to get to it all, of course. And of course, what I'm sharing with you are just my reflections as I bring together, my experiences of working with families and individuals and couples and things from day to day in practice and the many years of reflection that I've had. So that big topic, if you will, a very relevant topic, is around sexuality. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't work with parents and families uh, who are dealing with as one of their primary issues sexual promiscuity or at-risk behavior on the part of their teen. And it doesn't take much, does it, folks, to see that that the world out there right now, um, you know, in many ways is just, it's, I guess you could say, hand in hand with technology. The issues around sexuality have just, exploded and accelerated beyond what most parents had to deal with. Um, and, you know, it leaves a lot of parents going, what can I do? I mean, it's like things are so, you know, so dangerous out there. There's so many different avenues by which my son or daughter can find themselves lost very quickly. And um, so, yeah, I mean, that's what we're up against, and the different avenues and the different means by which this information, information, sexually explicit information, and sexual, what do you want to call it, options. I mean, the whole, again, it's just, there's just so many different sources of this that of course there's no way that we can eliminate it all and still prepare our children to engage effectively and courageously and resiliently within the adult world. I mean, so many parents have, feel as though they need to lock their sons and daughters up or restrict their entire access to digital media and social media. And of course, you know, that's an impossibility. I mean, so parents, are often come to me and they're very scared, and what is the answer? Is the answer in restriction? That seems to often be where things go. Restrict this, restrict that. Um, you know, if it's not restrictions around internet, it's restrictions around curfews, it's restrictions around clothing, it's restrictions around peer associations. It just becomes restriction, rules, restrictions. And of course, the more parents try to implement that, the more they feel out of control, because again, society just keeps pounding their family and their children with all sorts of sexually explicit avenues and material. And add to that just the the pressure, if you will, of adolescence, and again, inflated by what's going on in society. yeah, it's a significant thing to deal with. So what can we do as parents? I mean, there's so many different things, at play. Um, and as I've been thinking about this, it's still part and parcel of the inflated sense of entitlement and indulgence that is going on, in our world. I mean, my gosh, it probably started back in the 50s, especially in the 60s in the United States when, everybody thinks of Woodstock, when all of a sudden, free love was the banner that was being flown. Uh, and why might that be? Well, back in the 60s and 50s, especially 60s, 70s, and 80s and beyond, there's been this, people would call it counter-cultural revolution. There's really this kind of pushback against what, we could say. And one of the things that comes to mind and that I see frequently in families is that families are often in conflict and at war with each other. And unbeknownst to them, what they're really in conflict, or what's really in conflict, or what they're in conflict with, is the role that they're playing. See, because we come into this world, and we have to take on roles. We have to play roles. We have to be men. We have to be women. We have to fit into certain cultural expectations, certain family expectations. And we play all these roles. It's called family systems theory. We all get scripts to play. And sometimes those scripts can feel restrictive. And I want to say especially restrictive to the immature mind. See, the immature mind doesn't always have the ability to understand situations as they are. We don't understand why we play the roles we play. Now, a healthy role is one that allows, movement, if you will. A role can be helpful for a period of time, and then on a good day, we can move out of that role and maybe into another role or what have you. And I suppose that's what we would call growing up. We move through phases. But sometimes we get stuck in roles. And sometimes we get stuck in roles because we personally as human beings don't want to move out of them, or maybe the family or society demands that we stay in one. But we start to stay in particular roles and they start to limit us and smother us. And so we start to kind of fight that out in the world or in our family systems. And people don't know that what they're fighting against is actually the role that they have adopted or that they have made for themselves. And they're trying to get out of this role. And so some of those roles and some of the scripts that we have inherited have told us a bit about how we should be regarding sexuality. Now, I'm going to say, that there's some good stuff that was offered in those roles in terms of how we should conduct ourselves. And most of that was conservatively and modestly. But people don't really understand, what those things mean. And when people don't understand what those things mean, they can't perceive the role or the qualities of the role or what the role can offer in a meaningful or loving way, then it often gets interpreted as being oppressive or restrictive. And when we see oppression and restriction showing up, well, we're going to see rebellion. We're going to see the feeling of having lost something, or that somehow the role that we've played or the demands that society had have been traumatizing. And as you know, in many of the videos that I've spoken of before, whenever there's experience of trauma, or when we tolerate something, or when we play a role, for instance, and we feel like it's robbed us of something, then that ignites the fire of entitlement and indulgence. That causes somebody to become self-focused and self-obsessed, and only interested really in immediate gratification. So part of the problem here is that, whether it's nationally or in community or in families, people don't understand that the struggle they have is with the role that they play. you know? And so what does that mean for us as parents? It means that as parents, we have to introduce our sons and daughters, reintroduce our sons and daughters to a loving story about their bodies and about their sexuality. You know, part of a narrative that has accompanied some scripts or roles around sexuality in history have been more fear-based. Oh my gosh, you know, you better not do this, you better not do that, you better not get pregnant. I don't know how many times I heard that, you know, as a kid growing up. You better not get somebody pregnant, or if you're a girl, you better not get pregnant. It was like the worst thing in the world. If you were to get pregnant, it was like it was just going to destroy your life. And as I look back on that, that's a terrible narrative. That's a terrible thing to have to live with. That somehow this thing that's actually quite sacred, this thing called sexuality, and this sexuality as it resides in the human body, those are lovely things. Those are wonderful things. That is the power to create a human life. And there's nothing more sacred than that. There's nothing more beautiful. There's nothing more powerful than that. Now, you see, the way I'm describing this right now, that's a different story to tell. You know, who could be opposed to that story? Because that is the truth. See, when we paint this fear story, or this really negative story around our sexuality and around our bodies, then how can we value it? And so what I mean by that is that we tend to protect and we tend to respect that which we love. Does that not make sense? You think of anything in your life. If you love that thing, if you cherish that thing, then you protect that thing, right? Because you value that thing. And so we need to teach our sons and daughters how to love and respect their bodies and their sexuality. So we don't want to find ourselves being oppositional. We want to find ourselves as parents providing a kind of a meaningful, extremely meaningful and sacred context for this. And I think many parents have lost that ability. I mean, most of the parents that I know these days, you know, were born in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And it's those generations that have lost contact with that sacred narrative, that's the way to understand sexuality and how it manifests in our bodies as a beautiful, wonderful, sacred thing. You know, it became cheapened, if you will. You know, events happen how they happen, right? I mean, I think we could probably all agree that, you know, the human, at least North American appreciation for the sanctity of life has diminished significantly, right? I mean, that's, you know, that shows up in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different reports, you know, in terms of how we take care of our children, how we take care of our infants, how we take care of, you know, of the unborn. It all starts with the sanctity of life. Do we feel that human life is sacred? Because if we feel that human life is sacred, then our sexuality and our bodies also are sacred, become sacred instruments of that. So if we treat life, the basics of life, well, the basics of life are our bodies, right? And the chemical reactions and everything that occur, and attraction and libido and all this kind of stuff are kind of the basic building blocks of life. And then there's conception. If we treat all those things, you know, as commodities, or we are indifferent to them, or, you know, if we see them as meaningless, then we're in trouble. So we've got to return to that great vision and that great idea that you know, we say all life is precious, but it's not just life that exists in the here and now. It's those things that create the life as well, meaning our bodies, our sexual energy, all those things become sacred. And we as parents need to start very early in being able to help our young people understand that. Because when that doesn't get understood at an early age, it's very difficult to try to instill that later. We talk about, parents say, oh, well, I want my son or daughter to learn to respect themselves. Okay, well, where does that learning start? One could say, parents, how do you treat your own sexuality? I mean, my gosh, right now it's at an all-time high. I mean, you speak to any young person and they'll talk to you about what the environment, is like out there sexually, where, kids are hooking up left, right, and center. And the whole idea of dating and spending time to get to know a person is completely out the window. It's, there's, like I said, so many avenues by which people, not just young people, but all sorts of people. I mean, you haven't noticed now, it's permeated the entire spectrum. There are hookup sites and meeting sites and dating sites for people of all ages. And all you have to do is get on your computer, your cell phone, your tablet, whatever it is, and just swipe away. So this whole kind of hookup mentality has permeated all of society. And if you don't want your son or daughters doing that, then, we as parents, as leaders, we need to really get back to understanding the sacredness of our own bodies and our own sexuality and be able to celebrate that. And I'm not saying have parties and be all hedonistic. No, that's where that's part of the problem. To treat ourselves with reverence, to be grateful for the bodies and for the sexuality that we have, and show appreciation for that. And when we show love for that, then we can show respect for that and we can protect that. Modesty is a word that we hardly hear anymore. And back in the 60s and 70s, that's when the whole idea of modesty kind of was thrown out the window, and attacked. It was seen as somehow oppressive in order to be modest. But modesty is a simple idea. And, it's like, again, when we love and respect something, that like if you had something precious, if you owned something precious, where would you keep it? If you had a $20,000 diamond ring or a gold bar or, something that you considered incredibly precious, you wouldn't just put it out on the front lawn. You wouldn't put it in the middle of the street for all to touch, for all to grab. You would take really good care of it, and you would probably store it somewhere where it was nice and safe. And only the people that were worthy of gaining access to it, you might let them have some access. But it would be very few people. That's modesty. When we have something of value, we don't flaunt it. And even deeper than that, when we have something of value, we understand that we have that not by our own efforts. It's a blessing. So when we're blessed with something, we don't flaunt it. So if you happen to have a lot of money, or you happen to have, a lot of property, or you happen to be blessed in certain areas, or as we happen to be blessed in our sexuality and our bodies, we don't flaunt those things. It's not an act of oppression. It's an act of respect and love, and a show of reverence for oneself. And these are the kinds of ideas we need to start breathing life back into and sharing with our sons and daughters, and inviting our sons and daughters into a discipline that speaks to those things this way. As parents, we're not opposed to sexuality. We're not opposed to love. In fact, we're champions of it. So allow yourself that. I mean, it's all about integrity, folks. So you can hear my buzzer going off in the background. And I'll leave it there for tonight. You guys have a good evening. I hope that was helpful. Take care.